hasn't been touched on yet, although it certainly is going to be, and it's something that I know that you've touched on, Chris, in your column, and that is that Governor Corbett has managed to do something that not very many Republicans have done. I mean, for 3 years, he was tried and true with his no tax hike pledge and holding on to the conservative base. He outraged a lot of conservatives with his support for that $2.3 billion transportation package, which part of which is going to be paid for by you and me at the gas pumps. There's a lot of people upset about that.
Pennsylvanians will have the highest gas prices in the nation when this is fully phased in. It's going to be about 30 cents per gallon more than it is now. We're going to have the highest diesel prices by about 20 cents higher than the next highest state. That simply is going to drive people away. They're going to gas up across the border. It's going to drive businesses away. When you look at that, that is really just, his base is taking a huge hit on that. Yeah. There's a lot of conservatives that the Corbett campaign, I can tell you right now, they are counting on the conservatives to come back to support him because they have no other place to go. Yeah. He's wrong. They do. It may not necessarily be for Tom, or for a Democrat, but a lot of them are going to stay home and they're not going to work for Tom Corbett.
And you still think, you mentioned it earlier, you still think that we have not even a little bit heard the end of the Jerry Sandusky story?
Absolutely not. When you look at Tom Corbett to this day has still not answered some key fundamental questions in the Penn State Jerry Sandusky situation there. He really ran the bus over Penn State. And again, they're looking, they feel very offended by that, a lot of the Penn Staters. A lot of them feel that he ruined Joe Paterno's reputation needlessly. And again, some of these issues have their sidebars, I mean, different discussions there. And then when you look at he was a trustee, he says the sanctions were great. And then he kind of does the Al Gore, I was for it and then I was against it, and sues the NCAA because the sanctions were too harsh, loses that case. I mean, it looks like he's kind of grasping at straws. And there's just a lot of people that think that he could have gotten Sandusky off the street earlier. He didn't have to wait until they had 10 cases. Conveniently, it happened after the election because, you don't want to take on Penn State and the largest alumni network in the country in that situation. And people are very, very upset at that.
Wes, if you were going to identify one key issue in the gubernatorial race, where would you go?
I think education.
Yeah.
Particularly here in southeastern Pennsylvania, which is where these elections are won. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people, even from the suburban ring counties, that take a look at what's going on in Philadelphia, and they blame Tom Corbett for it. Yeah. Rightly or wrongly, you can make arguments on both sides that it was a loss of federal stimulus money, and you can finesse those arguments. But at the end of the day, it happened on Corbett's watch. Yeah. And I think in addition to that, higher education plays more across the entire state. Right. And the cuts to higher education hit the state schools pretty hard. So
when you talk about the kinds of problems that the governor finds, and really and truly some of the problems that he almost seems to create for himself. It was just last week when he had he was going to, for the first time, since in his 3 years, almost 3.5 years as governor, he was going to visit a first time ever a public school in Philadelphia. Apparently got wind that there was going to be a couple of groups there protesting his visit, and then decided, I can't believe it, decided not to go at all and just have a press conference at his downtown office instead. Again, just seems to me like, who's advising this guy, and does somebody tell him, go ahead and meet the protesters. Meet them on their own turf and explain your position.
Right. I think he's very tone deaf to political opportunities. And oftentimes you're not trying to sway the people that are out there protesting. Obviously you're not going to change their minds. What you are trying to do is sway the swing voters that see you engaging them and try to legitimately explain your position on an issue. So you're not fighting for those votes, you're fighting for the swing votes in the suburbs. Yeah. And he has not in any way, shape, or form been able to do that.
And again, isn't that the governor's job, though? Isn't it any elected official's job? It's not all, warm and fuzzy press conferences. You're going to have protesters. You're going to have people that don't necessarily agree with you. But he sits there and he says, I don't run for anything. I face things head on. How do you say that in the same day that you didn't face them head on? You didn't go. You didn't tout the achievement of that school. You left. Yeah. You basically showed cowardice in the face of a little bit of adversity. I mean, there's a lot of other, Ed Rendell, not in a million years would he have run. He would have waded down into the crowd. And again, I'm not a huge Ed Rendell fan. He would have done that. Chris Christie would have done that. Yeah. That's what made these governors, they had the charisma, and people may not agree with them, but they would follow them, they would support them. Corbett's nowhere to be found.
The other big issue that we're going to be looking here in terms of the elections here in Delaware County tied into that is the governor has made it pretty clear that he's going to do some things that he hasn't done up until this point. He's going to try to be a little bit more visible. He's going to be here, when I say here in southeastern Pennsylvania, in the Philadelphia suburbs, which are really the deciding factor in a lot of these statewide races. And as it turns out, he's going to have two very, very important races going on at the same time here in Delaware County. That is, there's going to be a state Senate seat, this 26th district seat, that's being vacated by Senator Ted Erickson, who's retiring after a long and distinguished term, one of the most effective legislators in Delaware County politics. That is going to be a race between County Council Chairman Tom McGarrigle and Union leader John Kane from Ridley Park. And one of the things that I find very interesting, Chris, is this idea of this might be an instance where really and truly Tom Corbett needs the Delco GOP and Tom McGarrigle more than the local guys need to him at the top. And then again this week you had stunning news out of Upper Darby where Representative Nick McCosey, who's represented the 163rd District in the State House for 36 years, ran and won 18 elections, decided he's had enough, he's going to step down. That's now going to be an open seat, contested most likely by Democrat Vince Rangione, who was an aide to Joe Sestak. And of course the Republicans have not yet tabbed a candidate for that race. And lo and behold, it's not going to be just Republicans, but the Democrats. Upper Darby politics is splintering like mad. In the 164th race, an incumbent Democrat, Margot Davidson, is going to face a challenge. But talk a little bit about the idea of the county GOP, obviously very, very well known for delivering the vote, and what they have to do for Tom Corbett.
Right, the Republican machine. I know they don't like to be called that, but they are a machine.
I wish you hadn't said that. I'm going to hear about that.
But they are, and I mean, that's not necessarily a negative term. That just means that they have a very well-oiled operation, despite the fact that for the first time ever, there are more Democratic votes in Delaware County than Republicans. Yeah. When the Republican organization wants something bad enough, they have a pretty good track record. And the Democrats have yet to be able to demonstrate that they can effectively win over that pool of swing voters. Mm-hmm. I think that they're going to have their hands full no matter what, the Republicans here. In the Senate district, ironically, some of the Democrats, if they run as an anti-tax candidate, I think that actually helps them. You can run against Tom Corbett's gas tax, which hurts everybody. You can run against the Delaware County Council, which is all Republican. They've raised taxes, you know, at the county level. Yeah. It's about 6 times, about almost a 25% increase. If you run, ironically, in the last race for council, the Democrats took the anti-tax pledge. The Republicans called that irresponsible, kind of reversal of roles.
It was.
If they do that, that's going to create some problems. I think it's going to be very difficult to hold the seat that Representative McCosey held. Mm-hmm. I think if I'm a betting, I think it's going to be a squeaker. I think the Republicans will hold the Erickson seat, yeah. But it's going to be tough. They're going to have to spend a lot of money, and that could be for control of the state Senate.
Yeah. All right, we'll go to our way we always close out the show, our lightning round, and I'm going to start going back to our students. I'm going to pose a question, and I'd like to get a response from all of you, and that is really simple. Tell me one surprising thing you think we're going to see in this November's election.
I think one surprising thing we're going to see is I do believe education is going to be a big deal. In this election, I'm expecting a really splintering election season coming up. I don't expect a whole lot of kumbaya, basically, to come along with both parties. So it should be interesting to watch it unfold. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of position themselves on the different issues. I guess that'll be the main part that I'll be looking out for in this next election season.
Next up.
Thank you. I don't think that we will see many surprising things in this upcoming election.
Surprise is no surprise. I like
so yeah, surprise is no surprise. I think that it's going to be politics as usual and Washington as usual. The game of let's introduce a bill so that we can take the interest groups involved for all that they have, and I think that it works both sides of the fence, both congressional leaders and interest groups together. They're out of touch with the American public, and they're out of touch with younger voters such as myself. I consider myself a young conservative, not so much Republican. I consider myself a young conservative voter, and I think that what they need to realize is that social issues are less important to young conservative voters than they used to be, especially the GOP. I think that that's an interesting point, that they need to realize that the times have changed and that those stale social issues really don't impress anyone. And I think that it would be a surprise, and I would like to see them start to shy away from that and get into practical issues that are going to help every American.
All right. I'm going to hand that back to the ladies in the back there.
I think basically that even though Tom Corbett's out of touch with the voters, I think it's going to be business as usual. He's just going to get reelected because that's what people have done and what people will always do. It's always going to be the same, I think.
All right.
What I'm interested to see this November is going to be a very heated debate contest between all of the Democratic candidates, nominees for governor, because as we know, there's actually a lot of them this year. So I think the debates could get pretty interesting. Very good.
All right, Wes, give me a stunner for something we're going to see in November that we don't expect.
Wow. Well, I think the real outcome of this election is the federal elections don't really matter this year. It's all about redistricting, and there aren't very many competitive districts. What really is going to take place, the real debate in this country, is 38 governors up for re-election. Yeah. And that's where the ideas are going to come from. And that's really, frankly, what I'm far more interested. Just watching Washington is grown boring. It's about state politics at this point.
Chris, you get the last word.
Congress, I think, if you see 5 seats change hands, it's probably going to be a lot, based on redistricting. Senate, I think the Republicans, if they finally get their act together, may make some gains, which is, again, even tougher for the Obama legacy there. I think Tom Corbett and the governor of Maine are the 2 Republicans that will go down. The question on Corbett is, what's the percentage? And by the way, it will be historic. No governor, since they allowed 2 terms, has ever lost.
It's always gone 2 terms and then just swapping parties back and forth every 8 years.
I wouldn't be surprised to see a 15 to 18 point margin. I think that's how upset and irate people are.
Think the Republicans can hold both this House and the Senate in Pennsylvania?
The House they'll hold because the majority is sizable. The Senate, I think they will hold. Remember that it's already gone down 10% under Corbett's watch. They were at 30, now they're at 27. You need 25 for a majority. Right. There's a number of other senators that are retiring, open seats there. They're going to spend a lot of money to try and retain this. But you may see that 27, go down a notch or so. But the battleground's right here in Delaware County for that.
Yeah. All right, something to look out for. One of the things that we have done with the newspapers and the websites of Digital First Media is we put together a regional editorial board, and we have come together and we have tried to identify for this year an issue that we are going to make the issue that we are going to push all year long. And as it turns out, not surprisingly, in an election year here in Pennsylvania, we are going to focus on 2 things. We're going to focus on the idea of education funding and the basic building block of education funding in Pennsylvania, and that is the property tax, and the various pushes that have been made in the legislature to alter the way that the Pennsylvania funds public education. And we're going to kick that off this Sunday with a special editorial laying the groundwork for a series that we're going to call Keystones, and that's going to appear in all the newspapers of Digital First Media in Pennsylvania. And then we will follow that up on Tuesday when the governor makes his budget address. Don't be surprised. He's already hinted at the fact that he is actually going to call for an increase in public education spending. Not so terribly surprising in an election year. Our thanks, Wes LaCrone, political science professor here at Widener. The students, the political science majors, we thank you. This is the start of a great partnership here on the campus of Widener University in Chester. We're going to be back on February the 26th. We're here every Wednesday night, live from the newsroom, 7 o'clock. We'll be back next Wednesday night. We'll talk to you then. Thanks.